most of the time when we are talking about CS, it's like you are fighting with sales, and
I know.
you are talking about, make them your partners and work with them. That would make so much sense. And
Yeah.
most of the time it's like me, us versus them kind of a fight when they're talking about CS and sales, which is not true.
I think one of the biggest things that I think about every single day is how do I segment my time? Because,
Mhm.
as a CSM, you only have so much time to ask any
Abs-
leader, anybody, and you have only so much time, right? And so you're trying to balance between reactive and proactive.
So
But
I love your book, right? And some of the sections that I really want you to, little elaborate on this. Like there's a chapter on just simple how to manage your book of business. Now it sounds very simple, but it isn't. There is so much more to it in terms of being able to have a process to manage it. And not many people have talked about those nitty gritties of how to really do it.
right, like you can't be proactive for all of them, especially depending on the size and makeup of your book. But you can identify, if you go look at a book
Yes.
of business, you can identify who are the ones that are more willing to work with you. And of
Mhm.
course, like those are the ones you're going to have to prioritize because there's a high potential that you're going to get a success story out of it, right?
Absolutely. Hello and welcome to the Scale Tail podcast. I'm your host Mosmi, and after a short break, I am back with another podcast with an amazing guest and an exciting topic. Today, we're not going to talk about CS heads and CS leaders, but going to talk about you, customer success professionals, and how you can make an impact in your business, in your work, and in your life. To talk on this topic, we have with us Jeff Mart. He's the Principal Customer Success Manager for large enterprises at LinkedIn. He has over 8 years of experience in customer success, but if you glance his LinkedIn, it looks like almost 2 decades of customer facing roles at various levels. He has co authored a book, Mastering Customer Success with Peter Ermali. We talked to Peter a few episodes ago, and I have become a real fan of this book because it talks a lot about tactical and practical things that early stage CSM or mid stage CSM would need to understand to make an impact in their lives. Jeff, it's so good to talk to you again. I remember we had such an amazing conversation the first time we talked. And
Yeah.
it's great to be on the podcast with you. Really excited for today's podcast.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I've seen a lot of your work and I've watched and I've got to see your experience and the businesses you've built. And so I've been super excited to get a chance to chat with you, Mazmi. And maybe someday I'll get a chance to interview you because you have quite the story too, as I got to learn more during our last conversation. So I've been really, really looking forward to it. So thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure and congratulations. Writing a book is a huge task. I completely understand. I write an article and like it feels like forever. It's a really, really difficult task to put all your thoughts together. And a
Yeah.
book is a huge achievement. So congratulations for that.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thank you. Yeah.
So the first question that I have with you is, this question I ask everybody. So how did you land up in customer success?
Yeah, great question. So I, coming out of college, I got into sales because, I didn't have, the best grades. I wasn't a CS major or anything like that. And so I did some sales in college. So I worked for a company called Xerox, selling those big giant copiers,
Yeah,
right?
we know Xerox.
Yeah, you know what
It's
I'm
a
talking
well,
about, right?
yes, everybody
And
knows Xerox.
yeah, yeah. And so I did enterprise sales for probably almost a decade.
Mhm.
And so throughout my entire 20s, it was almost all sales. And I just figured, I don't know if I want to carry a quota for the rest of my career,
Hmm.
right? I figured at some point I need a transition. And then I was able to get a role as a program kind of project manager at Microsoft. And I was there for 2, 3 years ish.
Mhm.
But the thing about that is I learned some new skills that I never had before as a salesperson. But uh, but I missed the customer facing side.
Mm.
Right. And then somebody I worked with at Microsoft went to SAP as a
Mm.
CSM. And she thought about me to come over. And so I was like, yeah, I mean, sounds great. And I interviewed. I didn't know I was going to absolutely just head over heels fall in love with the industry, right? Because for me, I really enjoyed being a program manager because, you get to impact the business more at scale. I also really miss the customer side of it too,
Customers.
because, you know, I think I'm an introvert, but I still really enjoy that, right? And so it was like this perfect like fusion of the two.
Combination. Yeah.
And, in CS, we're kind of project managers, right?
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely. We're marketing and project managers, kind of a lot of hats actually. But then, we're also kind of salespeople and advocates for the
Mhm.
business. So it was like the perfect mesh of two. And I don't know, I don't know if I can ever leave, right? So it's
Oh,
been
I hope you never do. I am hoping for more books and more content
yeah,
that needs
well,
to come out from your staples, of course.
feelings mutual with you too, Masmi. So yeah.
So
But
I love your book, right? And some of the sections that I really want you to, little elaborate on this. Like there's a chapter on just simple how to manage your book of business. Now it sounds very simple, but it isn't. There is so much more to it in terms of being able to have a process to manage it. And not many people have talked about those nitty gritties of how to really do it, right? So
yeah.
I thought that was a very intelligent thought process on trying to put together something like a step by step understanding for a CSM early stage or a mid stage, and trying to improve the way they work. So if
Yeah.
you can talk about that chapter a little, like I know there's so much more in the book, and I'm picking one chapter, but I think that's very, very interesting.
Yeah, no, thank you for the question. So it's really, I mean, I approach it from a couple different angles, right? I think one angle is really the tactical side, right? Managing your time, being proactive, reactive, the size of your book, your segmentation. You have different tier levels and maybe different industries or verticals. Right? So there's a lot of variables, and it's so hard to just, CS, even
Yes.
though it's been around for a while, it's still early kind of infancy stages, right? We're still trying to figure out a lot. And so it's not a one size fits all. And that's why in the book, we put in so many different things to
Mhm.
prioritize based on your book of business, right? So I'll approach it from that angle. But then there's another angle as a as how are you managing your book of business to further your career, right?
Yes.
Because I mean, for me, that's what's most important for me is like how do I further my career as in CS, right? And I think for a lot of your listeners, it's probably
Yes,
something that
absolutely,
they're concerned
absolutely.
about as well, right? But like tactically, maybe some of the most important things, at least for me in my career and some of the folks that I've worked with, mentors that I've had,
Mhm.
is obviously the segmentation, right? Understanding it's going to vary whether you have 300 clients, 50 clients, or
Yes.
five, right? So you have to take that in consideration. I think one of the biggest things that I think about every single day is how do I segment my time, because
Mhm.
as a CSM you only have so much time to ask any
Abs-
leader, anybody, you have only so much time, right? And so you're trying to balance between reactive and proactive. We all know reactive makes you the hero, but proactive makes you the hero to the
Is
company.
yes.
And like these are, if you're proactive enough, the reactive should come
Hmm.
down, right? But they're both equally important. But if you really want to stand out in your career and stand out as a CSM, it's really having time to go after these proactive activities, whether it's marketing or providing additional resources to your customers, right? But when I think
Yes.
about how do I prioritize my book, honestly, like sometimes I'm late on an email, follow-up email, or maybe I'll drop a ball on something because I'm so focused on wanting to be proactive. And there's a delicate balance, right? Sometimes, you know,
Yeah.
you have mission
It's a
critical.
complex. Yes. It's a complex balance, right? And at times a lot of CSMs feel overwhelmed
Yeah.
because of just so many accounts that I need to handle, and what do I like, where do I be proactive? And like the first step for that is trying to segment your customers, because you cannot be proactive for all of them.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely. And I think one of the things that's worked for me, I think you're right. Like you can't be proactive for all of them, especially depending on the size and makeup of your book. But you can identify, if you go look at a book
Yes.
of business, you can identify who are the ones that are more willing to work with you. And of
Mhm.
course, like those are the ones you're going to have to prioritize because there's a high potential that you're going to get a success story out of it, right?
Absolutely.
And then no one's going to know that maybe there's a client that maybe they're just not going to meet with you. They just don't want to. There's not a whole lot you can do sometimes, right? And now you want to make sure that, you're tracking, you give them attention, that if somebody looks at it down the road, that they know you didn't neglect the client. But sometimes you want to go as a, selfishly as a CSM, you also want to make sure that you're making the most out of like opportunities from like great clients that are willing to engage, right? So I'd
Yes.
say like one of the biggest things for me is just the proactive versus reactive.
Mhm.
That's a big part of how I look at my book.
And you also have to focus on your own KPIs, right? Your KPIs would be probably renewal or upsell or getting case studies or advocacy. Now,
Yeah,
that also should be a very important criteria because it furthers your own career along with, of course, the business itself.
yeah, absolutely. You know, I think one of the things, biggest areas that you can focus in if you want to stand out in CS is focusing on your sales partnership, right?
Mhm.
So, I mean, this is very natural in sales. Like you're going to focus on the areas where you see white space, right? You
Mhm.
see potential opportunity. I think as a CSM, if you can be an incredible either quarterback or assistant to a deal, right? Or help your or build a strong relationship with your sales partner and help them grow and
Mhm.
get revenue, they're going to be your strongest advocate internally. And if you can be associated with driving revenue, which is, a big part of what we try to do in CS,
Absolutely.
I think the sales leadership, your sales partners are going to talk about you, and I think that's going to just be good for your brand, right? As a CS, that's what we're doing. A
Mhm.
lot of what we're doing is building our brand, right?
And that's a very interesting perspective, because most of the time when we are talking about CS, it's like you are fighting with sales. And
I know.
you are talking about, make them your partners and work with them. That would make so much sense. And
Yeah.
most of the time it's like me, us versus them kind of a fight when they're
No,
talking about CS and sales, which is not true.
it's not true. No, you're 100% right. I mean, how many, like you said, it looked like I've been in CS for a while, but I've been fortunate enough to be part of a few really big companies and see how they do CS. Well, you'll see a lot of rumblings, in the CS office or,
Mhm.
water cooler talk is, my sales partner this or my sales partner that, or they just don't get it. I'm trying to, we always say, well, I'm trying to help you by making the customer more sticky, drive better adoption. I'm trying to help you, but you're trying to make me do this. And it's just the wrong mindset. Because I think if you turn them
Yes.
into your biggest advocates, it's incredible for your brand. Right? So,
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, there's another topic that has come up quite often, and I really want to put forward here. It's very important for customer success professionals.
yeah.
A lot of people are talking about that there are multiple skill sets that a CS person is required to have nowadays, and it's very hard. You gotta have negotiation skills, you gotta be able to understand data, you should be able to leverage AI, you should be able to, do so many, like there's so many skill sets, which is kind of a little hard for a person who's growing to, become expert in all of these. But
Yeah.
they are all equally important to produce good quality results.
Yeah.
So, how does a CS professional go about it, or what does a CSM has to do? Like, how do they handle this pressure of
Mhm.
expectation of having expertise in so many different, areas?
That's an amazing question. And it's probably like one of my favorite topics to like think about, talk about, share about. It's like there's this book called Strengths Finder, right?
Hmm.
I went to work for Microsoft. They made me read it before I started my first day. And I
Wow.
understand why, right? If you've ever gone out, have you ever gone out dancing with friends,
Hmm.
Masmi?
Yeah,
Right? I
yes,
don't know,
absolutely.
currently or before, how you have the friends in your mind,
Mhm.
what kind of when you go dancing, what kind of dance move they're gonna do, right? Because it's
Absolutely,
just
yes.
right, like everybody has their own dance move, right? I used to go out with some friends, 20 years ago, and I actually just saw them last week,
Mhm.
right? And we are hanging out or whatever, and they had the same dance moves 15, 20 years later. And I knew it. I just knew that was going to come out again, right? And it's really interesting. As CSMs, we kind of have the same thing, right? In your CS organization, you can kind of tell who's really great with data. There's a CSM that's really brilliant with the platform. They know every nook and cranny of the platform. There's a CSM that is a wizard with PowerPoint, CSM that you know is probably going to be the next CSM manager because they just, you know, they show those kind of traits or those
Mm.
attributes, right? And like you look around the organization, you know who to go to for what. Right? If anybody's
Yes.
part of it, you just kind of
Yes.
everybody has their own skill. And because there's so many skills, you can't master everything. You can't be the, master of all trades, but you can lean into what you're good at. And if you really like data, you like storytelling with data, like lean into that and find areas that you can shine in that role, right? And then find other people like that, and you can and try to find initiatives in your organization that align with your strengths, so you can stand out in that area and bring people along with you, right? But people trying to be all things, I can't do that. Like one of the things, I'm good with our platform, but I'm not very technical, right? One of the CSMs on our team, he was like my mentor when I came on at LinkedIn. He's really technically sound, right? So if anything, I go to him. I don't have to know everything, and no customer expects you to, right? But if you lean into what you're strong with, and then you work on projects, and you find other people like that, and you find leaders that really value that, oh, man, you're gonna take off, right?
Oh my God, that was such a beautiful and relatable analogy. I think everybody in any part of the world can relate to that. Uh,
You should also figure out what your dance move is too. So
yeah, yes, that's the first thing you need to do.
yeah,
So, Jeff, I would love to, put that link of the book that you just mentioned. I was trying to talk about your book and you're mentioning another one, and I think that would be valuable. So, if we would love to put that link at the end of the podcast so that if somebody wants to read that, and of course, mastering
thank you.
CS, that would be very useful. And thank you very much for sharing that.
Yeah,
That's a very, I think that's such an important part of CS, bringing
yeah,
collaboration into your own organization and leveraging that within the organization
yeah.
for everybody's benefit, of course.
Absolutely. I mean, somebody's looking for your talent, right?
Yes.
Somebody in your organization is looking for what you're good at, right? Because like in CS, we cover so much. The unique thing about us is that we touch we're kind of the connective tissue in an organization, right? We touch so many parts of the organization. We influence so many parts of the organization. So that being said, like your skill, whatever your skill is, whatever your niche is, whatever you're good at, whatever you're
Mhm.
known for, lean into it because I guarantee you somewhere in your organization, like there's a leader, there's a team, there's a project that absolutely needs it, right? So,
So we talked about how to manage your work. We talked about how to leverage expertise within your team. Now,
yeah,
as a CSM, how do I make an impact into my organization? I think that is something that every CS thinks about every day. How do I stand out in my role? You know, that's the path to career progression, right? Everybody wants to grow.
yeah.
What do I do? What am I supposed to do? What is my direction? How do I stand out?
Um, well, I think there's a few things you can do, right? And I think it's role agnostic, right? I think a
Mhm.
lot of it has to do with just career in general. But I think the baseline is, Peter talked about this before. Yeah, the baseline is you got to do your job well, right? Like that's like I think that should go without saying, right? You
Yes.
have metrics, whatever your metrics are, your KPIs are, you got to do your job well. You have to be competent in your role, right? But standing out, I think also has a lot to do with playing in your strength zone, right? Taking on projects that are in your strength zone that help you stand out, not trying to focus on your weaknesses, make them not a detractor, but then focus on your strengths. I think the other thing you can do too is, and I think a lot of CS leaders are happy to do this because,
Mhm.
as I think in CS, when you're customer facing, you're either a seller or a server. And for me, I found out I'm a server, right? And so I think a lot of people in the CS organization, they want to help us in our career. So one of the best pieces of advice I got from my manager when I started LinkedIn, her name's Linda. Call her out
Mhm.
because I love that she did this, and I've been able to share this with a lot of other folks, and they love it too. So I started from her. Is I create a career dream team, like a career roster, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what I mean is, I think everybody should have like a sponsor, a coach, a mentor, a friend, an advocate, right? Somebody that that knows your work, knows your goals, but is at high level enough to see opportunities for you. That's a sponsor, right? And then you have a coach, right? A coach is someone that's willing to tell you what you don't want to hear, right? But what you need to hear. They're not afraid to walk on eggshells or tiptoe around. And then you have like your manager that knows your work and can
Mm-hmm.
speak to it, right? Because they're in it every day. A mentor that's maybe in a role that you want to aspire to, but you gotta have someone like that, right? So you can pick their brain, ask them, what did you do to get to that role? And then a friend tour. I love friend tour the most. I have a lot of friend tours. Like people that you respect, they respect you. You know, they know you personally, know what your goals are, maybe your family a little bit, but you also respect their opinion enough to listen, right? So I think as you want to stand out, having those advocates behind you is huge, right? And I think that's for any career goal, right? But also, having other people in these roles that can kind of, help you along the way, I think is pretty huge. But of
No,
course, you gotta be competent in your role too.
yeah, I don't remember reading this part in your current book. So I am hoping there is another one coming.
Yeah, no, it's not. But yeah, it's just something that's kind of near and dear to my heart because, I think because it's not, I don't think it's CS specific, right? I think it's
Yes,
just,
but I think that's a brilliant thought, the way you structured and you put it together. And
you know,
please, convey my thanks to Linda,
yeah,
getting you started in this. But the thought process and the way you structured it and the way you put that together, the all the people that you need is amazing. And that gives so much perspective for, because when people struggle, they always look out for guidance, and you have structured the entire guidance infrastructure around you as to
yeah,
how you put together what are the roles, where will you find them, and what is expected of each of these roles, right?
absolutely.
So
I feel like
this
it gives me,
this
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, please go ahead, Jeff.
No, yeah, I feel like it gives me a peace of mind, right? I have some folks that are advocates for me and they've advocated for me. And I had last year was probably one of the funnest, most stressful years I've had in CS. But it's
Mhm.
because like I've had a couple of advocates and sponsors kind of emerge and
Mhm.
really advocate for me. And I'm actually looking at a couple letters I wrote them. I'm going to
Mhm.
send it out
Oh.
today because they've just been so instrumental in just me having opportunity to be exposed to new leaders, to just opportunities across the organization. And so there's like a peace of mind knowing that I have all these people in these spots, just in my career, but in my life
Mhm.
that I can rely on to help me move forward, right? Just because like if I'm moving forward, I'm not as worried about being laid off and stuff like that, right? They say
Yes.
the best defense is a good offense, right? If your
Yes.
customer if your
Absolutely.
customer is upselling and cross-selling, right, they're probably not going to go back, right? So I know if I can have people to help me move my career forward, I'm not going to slip back, right? And it gives you a really good peace of mind.
Huge confidence. Yeah, and huge confidence actually. You do so much better work with that peace of mind.
Yes, yes, and you don't have to worry about, oh, well, the politics and stuff. You just can focus on doing your best work, and that's
So,
in CS that's fun.
so now, Jeff, I have a very personal question.
Please,
How
yeah.
hard was it to write the book?
Uh, I think it was just as hard as I thought it was going to be. Actually, somebody else
Mhm.
asked me that yesterday, and it was really difficult. But I'd say it gradually got. I guess the mystery was like my doubt. I guess my self doubt. The difficulty was pretty static across the experience. But my self doubt, I mean, I never wrote a book before, right? My self doubt in the beginning was, just on full transparency. And but after I wrote the first couple of chapters, I was like, oh, that's how I write. I didn't know how I write chapters, like, because I never, tried to write a
Mhm.
book before. Obviously Peter is a genius too, and so it was nice having to be able to bounce ideas off of him. But it's like you go to something, a lot of people go to college, like a big part of college is learning how to learn, right?
Mm-hmm.
Writing a book is learning how to write and how to get your thoughts and organize them, right? Use analogies and stories so that somebody can start from scratch and pick it up and learn. And that was terrifying and difficult, but I like that gives you a sense of confidence of yourself too. Now that you've been able to do that, I feel like a more confident CSM, right? Because of it. So, and competent.
There is so much, when you start writing a book, I feel that you will be overwhelmed with the number of things you want to put in the book,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, it would be really hard to decide, okay, let's stick to this and this focus on this, and it's okay. Because most of the time, like what I've heard from authors, is they
Yeah.
end
Yeah.
up writing a lot and then they have to make it crisp, cut, make it shorter, make it
Yeah.
crisper, make it, really focused. So was that something that you struggled with as well?
Yeah. Actually, I watched a couple of YouTube videos because I was like, I'm fish out of water, right? So I watched a few YouTube videos of some folks teaching about how do you
Hmm.
get your thoughts to paper, right?
Hmm.
So I have a big whiteboard in my house, and I just started. Honestly, like I just whiteboarded everything, and I put it all in OneNote. I'm like, there's so much there, especially in CS. Like we were talking about
Yes,
earlier, we touch
it's
so
an
much.
ocean.
It's not just sales, and I can focus
Hmm.
on sales process. It's like we do sales process, but we also do a gajillion other things too, right? And so it's like, how do you how do you piece that together? And so, yeah, you end up having to take things out because you want to figure out like what's the most valuable because you want people to
Hmm.
be able to take what they learn
Yes.
and it be actionable, right? And then, like you said, you put it in a way where it's consumable, people can understand from
Yes.
start to finish. And so, I think I didn't think I did, but I guess I do. But I think everybody has a book in them and a podcast, right? And a podcast. Right? But we all go through so much experience in our life. I mean, everybody has a book. Everybody has a book in them.
That's very kind of you, Jeff. And I hope some of the listeners might get inspired.
Yeah,
And I think there is room for a lot of CS content with people's
absolutely,
experiences that needs to be shared. And it's
absolutely.
amazing that the book that both of you wrote, you and Peter, and you focused on customer success managers, customer success operators, and not just the CS heads, because there's a lot being written about CCOs and how to manage your entire customer success division. But you focused on the real people who actually do the on ground job, and I love that the way it has been put together. So why I'm talking about, because I just believe it can be hugely valuable for my listeners.
Thank you.
And I genuinely believe that there is something that they will be able to get just by listening to the podcast. And you have amazing analogies to put together and explain things in a very, very simple way.
Yeah, well, I'm very simple, so I like simple analogies that make sense. And so, yeah, well, I really appreciate it. It was definitely interesting because, like Peters is well established,
Yes.
influential person in the industry that's in a lot of ways built a lot of the industry, right? And continues to influence it in a big, big way. And me, I'm still in IC. And so when I first got asked to write the book, I was like, huge imposter syndrome. Like, who am I? Like, there's so many amazing CSMs, right? Even just in my organization that I work in, there's so many CSMs. I'm like, they run laps around me, right? So I'm thinking, oh gosh, how am I going to do this? But then the combination of me and Peter, right,
Yes, I think
I think it's a
that's
very unique one, right?
That's amazing. I think that combination worked wonders to create a craft which is so valuable
Yeah,
because of his level of experience and your level of experience in terms of doing all that groundwork. I think that brings
yeah,
together something amazing. And I'm sure Peter saw something amazing in you. I don't know, you still have imposter syndrome, but I love the conversation.
yeah. Well, thank you. I really appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Jeff. Thanks a lot for taking out time. I know we've been trying to get this podcast recorded for quite some time. But
It was
thank you very
worth the
much.
wait. It was worth the wait, 100%. So
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks a lot for taking out time. I like it was fantastic. I thank you very much for joining the show. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And when I'm having a conversation with you, it just flows. So thanks for taking out time from your schedule.
Oh, well, thanks, Mosme. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, Jeff. And thanks to all the listeners for joining us in today's podcast. If you like to connect on Jeff on LinkedIn, I'll provide all the links in the description. You will have his book, Mastering Customer Success, link in the description. And we'll try to get the other book that he mentioned during the session, and we'll try to put the link as well. And if you like the podcast, please feel free to follow, subscribe. We are available on all major podcast platforms: Spotify, Apple, YouTube. And see you in the next episode soon. Thank you very much. Thanks, Jeff.
Thank
Have a
you.
good day. Bye bye.
Bye.